I agree with you. Do you think maybe, just maybe, and this is a hope of mine rather than a belief, but it is a hope, this woke moment that we're in, it's just one of those periods in time in human history where everyone looks back on it 30, 40 years later and just goes, oh, suddenly we had people running around saying everyone's a communist, or suddenly we had people running around saying everyone's a witch, or suddenly we decided we need to torture people who don't believe quite the right kind of Christianity. It's just a moment when everybody goes mad for a bit, and it's important not to overreact in terms of tearing down institutions like the BBC in response.
No. I wish that was the case. I really do.
So do I.
I think we've got to stand up and fight, and I mean everybody, because they're the ones looking to tear down our institutions. You know, they're literally ripping down statues left, right, and centre. You know, we've got the new diversity commission that's been set up in London to look at what to tear down next. How horrible is that? They're not going to be putting up any new statues. They're not going to be honouring anyone else. They're going to be looking at who they can destroy, who they can cancel next, because they're not quite woke enough by today's standards. You know, this idea of looking at historical figures by today's standards is nonsensical, because where does that stop? In 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, when we look back at people from today, are we going to be cancelling them? And that's like, you know, the issue with the school that came up last week, where they renamed their houses from Lord Nelson and Sir Walter Raleigh to Marcus Rashford and Greta Thunberg. It's like, these are people that are still alive, still living. They could get cancelled tomorrow if they say the wrong thing. How are you not forward-thinking enough to perceive that? You can't keep adjusting your standards in this way. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, obviously, Greta Thunberg's a bad choice because she's the queen of truancy. So, you know, bad role model for
you got the
students,
dig in.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a former teacher. He's like, I don't care if she just didn't go to school enough.
Yeah. Go to school, kids.
Go to school, kids. But look, on the statue thing, let me put a counterpoint to you, because I'm interested in your answer more than anything. What is the argument for, I grew up in Bristol. When I came to this country, I lived in Bristol. What is the argument that explains why the descendants of slaves who were taken out of Africa, taken to Jamaica, and then maybe some of them came over here, why should they be walking around looking at a statue of a man who profited from their ancestors being murdered, raped, tortured, enslaved, etc.? What possible reason could we have as a country for continuing to honor that person by having their statue, and a living human descendant of slaves having to look at that?
Has anyone walked around anywhere and seen a statue and said, oh my God, that offends me, ever? I'm not convinced that actually happens. I'm not convinced that people are offended by statues. I think it's just virtue signaling. They want to show how good they are and how bad these people were historically. If we look far back in our history, you know, if we keep going back in our history, we'll find a flaw with every single person. Nobody was perfect. And throughout history, unfortunately, slavery was a thing. It was a terrible, terrible thing, but it was a thing for a long time. So a lot of people from those periods were involved in some way or another, in slavery, right? But that doesn't mean they didn't start charities. That doesn't mean they didn't build hospitals. That doesn't mean they didn't educate kids. And when we put statues up, we put statues up in honor of their accomplishments and their achievements. We don't put them up in honor of the bad things that they did. You know, Winston Churchill is a great hero of mine because he almost single-handedly prevented fascism on a global scale. You know, we wouldn't have entered the war.
Sorry, I think the Russians might have a couple of words to say about that.
But we wouldn't have entered the war if it wasn't for him,
I'm
right?
joking. Of course, you're right.
And
we won.
And he said and did a lot of horrible things too. But that doesn't negate the fact that he stood up to fascism. And it's the same across the board. We have to look at people holistically, and we don't put these...
But we do draw the line in some places, right? There are people who objectively did some things that are so bad that no matter how well they made the trains run, it just doesn't offset it, right? So we do draw a line somewhere, don't we?
But we only put statues up for people that have, you know, achievements that we should honor. We don't really put statues up for bad people in general, do we?
Well, in the Ulaanbaatar, they have a statue of Genghis Khan.
That's a good point. You got me there. But I think what it comes down to for me is that if we look at these things holistically and we don't put them up to venerate them, we're not worshipping these people. They're not saints. And even as saints themselves, we're not perfect people. They all had pasts and histories. So we need to look at history entirely holistically, take on both sides of every argument, and then think, did this person contribute to our society in a way that has improved it and got us to where we are today? If they have, great. If they haven't, then there's a conversation to be had about where you go from there. But I don't think we should be looking around to say which bad person can we remove next, or who had some remote link to a plantation at some point in their family tree, even if it was nothing to do with them. It's just bonkers.
I do agree with you. We've gone too far, but I still am, I don't know. And the reason I'm asking you these slightly provocative questions is just because I'm trying to work it out in my head. I don't know what the justification is, because the guy in Bristol, Colston, he didn't have a remote link to a plantation.
No.
His business was slavery, right? So I didn't at all like the way that was dealt with at the time. No accountability, no, just people come along and tear down a statue. To me, that's wrong. That should be done through a proper process. But equally, I sort of don't. I struggle to make the positive case for having a statue of him erected now.
Yeah.
So why should it be up now? yeah. Maybe you'd like to start a campaign, Calvin. I don't know. But do you see what I'm saying? Like, if we wouldn't erect that statue now, should it really be up there now?
Look, I think we should handle these decisions democratically.
Yeah, that I completely agree with you on. Right. Completely.
So if enough people are offended by something, then there should be a consultation period and we should address it appropriately. That's how we should handle it. As for Bristol, they're kings of the woke, aren't they? They've been saying recently that they want to pay, or that the UK should pay reparations to descendants of slavery. I have no idea how that would work, because in this system, we don't have government money. We have taxpayer money. Therefore, they're asking taxpayers to pay people who were never slaves, money from people who were never slave owners. And that would mean people like, me, my money would be going to pay other brown people. How does that make sense? Poor brown people would be paying rich brown people. It's absolutely insane.
Your mum would have to pay your dad, which I'm sure she wouldn't be happy about, mate.
But that's the thing. My dad would be paying his dad too in this system. It doesn't make any sense. I don't think reparations are a logical thing to do. But I think also, like I said, we do have to acknowledge our history holistically, which does mean saying that, slavery was bad and we had a hand to play in that. But it also means that we also pretty much abolished slavery on a global scale. It was the Slavery Abolition Act, and it was our Navy that put slavery to an end. So we should celebrate our successes as much as we look towards the negatives.